Welcome to Jazz Piano Skills. I'm Dr. Bob Lawrence. It's time to discover, learn, and play jazz piano. I know it's hard to believe, but today we begin week 4 of 2024. Wow. And for Jazz Piano Skills, the first 3 weeks of the year have been a whirlwind, to say the very least. And that is why today I'm pumping the brakes, at least a little bit, to recap the first 3 episodes. I want to, and I thought it would be a good idea, to reflect on the harmonic analysis, melodic analysis, and improvisation development study, the process of tune learning that I unveiled in the last 3 podcast episodes. I think you all would agree we covered a lot of information quickly. So it only makes sense, and certainly it does educationally, to circle back around through the past 3 episodes to bring all of the information together into a concise outline that can serve as our tune learning blueprint. Now, this blueprint will allow us to utilize our study and practice time in such a way that we maximize the development of these critical and essential jazz piano skills as we apply them to tunes. You know, at the end of last year, I announced that moving forward, jazz piano skills episodes would be primarily devoted to learning jazz standards, learning jazz tunes. And of course, learning jazz tunes through applying the various jazz piano skills we have studied over the past 4+ years, right? Skills like scales, and arpeggios, voicings, rhythms, vocabulary, harmonic movement, improvisation techniques, to name just a few, right? It makes sense. We're taking our skills to the tunes and not vice versa. In other words, we didn't jump into tune learning 4 years ago, hoping that somehow, magically, the tune would teach us the skills needed to play jazz. That is truly having the cart ahead of the horse. It's just plain and simple. It's backwards. Now, I made a point to mention over the past 3 weeks on several occasions that there is a sequential order to learning jazz tunes, which really shouldn't surprise anyone. There is not one high-level skill that you can successfully develop without having a strategic and formulaic game plan. I can confidently guarantee you that a scattershot approach, or what I like to call a YouTube approach, to trying to learn how to play jazz piano, to learning how to play jazz tunes, will only cause frustration, confusion, and ultimately, as I mentioned last week, your raising of a white flag. So my goal from day one with jazz piano skills has been to not only introduce you to the essential jazz piano skills, discover, but to also provide you with a way to successfully study the skills, learn, and a process for developing a physical command of the skills, play. Imagine that. Discover, learn, play. I have also mentioned over the past few weeks that if you have been a faithful jazz piano skills listener for the past 4+ years, you have become intimately familiar with the jazz piano skills needed to begin tune study. Now, I also mentioned that if you haven't been grinding along with us over the past 4+ years, no worries. This is a great time to jump on board to begin developing and enhancing your jazz piano skills. The tune study we are going to be doing every month will help you sift through and prioritize the last 4 years of podcast episodes so that you can begin maximizing your jazz piano skills immediately. So if you're a jazz piano skills old-timer or a jazz piano skills newbie, regardless of which one you are in the right place at the right time to begin a jazz piano journey that will have a profound impact on your understanding of music, your overall jazz piano playing, and of course, your approach to learning jazz tunes. So we started 2024 with a bang, week 1. Wow. A harmonic analysis of the jazz standard, There Will Never Be Another You. Followed by another bang, week 2, with a melodic analysis of There Will Never Be Another You. Followed by yet another bang, week 3, with improvisation development of There Will Never Be Another You. Bottom line, we didn't waste any time ramping up the new year. Again, a ton of information covered in a very short and very fast 3-week period, which is precisely why today, we're taking a deep breath. We're taking the time to intellectually walk back through this 3-stage process, the last 3 weeks, this 3-stage process of learning jazz tunes, so that we can move forward with clarity and confidence. So today you're going to discover a concise yet thorough blueprint for learning jazz tunes. You're going to learn an organized 3-tier process for learning jazz tunes. And you are going to play, conceptually, the jazz piano skills needed for learning jazz tunes successfully. So, as I always like to say, regardless of where you are in your personal jazz journey, a beginner, an intermediate player, an advanced player, or even if you are a seasoned and experienced professional, you're going to find this Jazz Piano Skills podcast lesson exploring the correct way to approach learning jazz tunes to be very beneficial. But before we get started, I want to, as I always do, welcome first-time listeners to Jazz Piano Skills. And if you are indeed a new listener, if you're new to Jazz Piano Skills, I want to personally invite you to become a Jazz Piano Skills member. Your membership grants you access to the premium content for this podcast episode and every weekly podcast episode. Premium content will help you thoroughly and correctly discover, learn, and play the jazz standards that we are studying or the jazz piano skills that we are studying, and, as the old saying goes, so much more. For example, as a Jazz Piano Skills member, you'll have access to the past, current, and future educational weekly podcast packets. Now, these are the illustrations, the lead sheets, and the play-alongs, the backing tracks that I develop and produce for every weekly podcast episode. Right? These podcast packets help you get the most out of each weekly Jazz Piano Skills podcast episode, and of course, you should be listening to them having them in your hands when listening to the podcast, of course, and have them on your piano when practicing. You also have access as a Jazz Piano Skills member to a self-paced and sequential jazz piano curriculum, which is loaded with comprehensive courses containing educational talks, interactive learning media. There are video demonstrations in all 12 keys of the skill, jazz piano skill that's being explored, and much more. You also have a reserved seat in my online weekly masterclasses, which are held every Thursday evening. If you can't attend, no problem. Masterclasses are recorded, and you can watch and rewatch the video, whenever and as often as you wish. You also, as a Jazz Piano Skills member with premium content access, have access to an online interactive fake book containing must-know jazz standards with excellent chord changes, chord scale relationship maps, harmonic function analysis, listening suggestions, historical insights, and more. As a Jazz Piano Skills member, you can hang out with old jazz friends and make some new jazz friends in the online private Jazz Piano Skills community, which hosts a variety of engaging forums. And finally, your Jazz Piano Skills membership grants you unlimited private, personal, and professional educational support whenever and as often as you need it. Now, all of these amazing privileges are waiting for you, wanting to help you discover, learn, and play jazz piano. So check it all out at jazzpianoskills.com and of course, become a member to enjoy premium podcast content and all the other privileges that I just mentioned. Of course, if you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to contact me. I am happy to spend some time with you and answer any questions that you may have. Okay, on to the question of the week. And this week's question comes from longtime Jazz Piano Skills listener, Richard Kelman. Richard's residing in the Caribbean, the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Richard's question is a good one, and one that I know many of you have as well. It comes at the perfect time, considering we will be doing a harmonic analysis of some tune every single month. Now, Richard writes, although I'm taking my time to work through the approach and material, I am keeping up with listening to the podcast and class recordings, which are a lot of information delivered in a fun learning environment. I have a question that came to light as I listened to the last masterclass. In the first episode of the year, I followed your advice of thinking of the chord changes in relation to the home key. However, in trying to rationalize and memorize the 5 key progressions that you highlighted with There Will Never Be Another You, I got stuck. For example, harmonic pattern number 1, which is the 7 half diminish, going to the 3 dominant to the 6 minor, doesn't work for me because the 3 isn't the 3 minor from the E flat major scale. Harmonic pattern number 2, 5 minor 7 to 1 7 to 4 major 7, again doesn't work for me as the 5 isn't the 5 chord from the scale. Instead, I thought of the progressions in section A as 2-5-1 to the minor 6 and 2-5-1 to the major 4th. Then, to continue, a backdoor dominant to the tonic, the D flat dominant 7 to E flat major, followed by a 2-5 of the dominant 5, and finally a 2-5-1 to the tonic. Is this acceptable, or would it get me into difficulty later on? For example, I noticed in the last class this may have some impact on the scale used for improvisation. I think Jeff may have raised a similar question, but I'm not sure. Wow. Is that question loaded or what? It's very well thought out, Richard. And I am sure many other folks are thinking, what? What did you just ask? And other folks are thinking, right on, I get it. Right? And actually, you are spot on when it comes to doing chord scale relationship analysis. However, and I think this is at the core of your question right here, chord scale relationships are not the same as harmonic function analysis. And when we try to combine the two into one or make them the same, that's where the confusion, when you say you got stuck, that's when that confusion or you get stuck happens, right? So allow me a few minutes to explain. In measure 3 of There Will Never Be Another You, the chord change is D minor 7 flat 5 or D half diminished. And it's analyzed as the 7 half diminished of the key. The next chord in measure 4, G7 flat 9 flat 13, the harmonic analysis, that's a 3-7. That's a 3 dominant, flat 9, flat 13. And then, of course, measure 5 is the C minor 7, which is analyzed as the 6 minor. Now, the problem that Richard's talking about is that G7, that G dominant 7, 3-7, that doesn't shake hands with music theory that the G in E flat major is supposed to be G minor 7, not G dominant 7. So I want you to keep this in mind. All 1 chords can be major, dominant, minor, half diminished, or diminished. All 2 chords can be major, dominant, minor, half diminished, and diminished. All 3, all 4, all 5, all 6, all 7 chords can be major, dominant, minor, half diminished, or diminished. Right? In other words, every chord, every function, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, can be any quality. Keep this in mind. Now, the next progression that Richard is speaking of is in measure 7, the B flat minor 7. The harmonic analysis of that is the 5 minor 7, going to an E flat dominant 7 in measure 8, which is a 1 dominant, and then the A flat major in measure 9, which is the 4 major. Richard wants to think of that as a 2-5-1 in the key of A flat, which it is. It's a nice chord scale. That's chord scale relationships, right? That's understanding what key center that progression is pointing you to for improvisation purposes. However, harmonic analysis is something completely different. Again, all chords can be major, dominant, minor, half diminished, and diminished, right? All 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, the function. Right? So again, remember, all chords can be major, dominant, minor, half diminished, and diminished. I know that music theory tells us that the 1 chord and the 4 chord are major, the 2, 3, and 6 chords are minor, the 5 chord is dominant, and the 7 is half diminished, right? This is correct in music theory. However, tunes are not that clean and tidy. It is important to remember that harmonic analysis is about hearing root movement first, then the quality of the sound second, whether it's major or minor, and so on. Harmonic analysis is fantastic and necessary ear training. Chord scale relationships for improvisation is a completely different skill. So when doing chord scale relationship analysis, you determine the pool of notes, the scale, that will serve as a framework when improvising over a grouping of chords, right? So both skill sets, harmonic function and chord scale relationships, are important. Confusion occurs when we try to think of both skills as one, or when we think that the expression harmonic function is another way of saying chord scale relationships. It's not. They're different terms referring to different skills. Now, I hope that helps, Richard. That's a fantastic question, and it takes some reflecting and re-reflecting to have it all sink in. But I promise you, stick with the program, and as we go through the year with our analysis, and as you continue to work on harmonic function and hearing root movement, you will start to understand the difference between these two skills. Great question, Richard. And I hope my answer helps. And as always, if further clarification is needed, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. You know how to get in touch with me, so please do so. You know, I think it's great, right? I had a teacher that used to say to me all the time, I know how you're progressing by the questions you ask and the statements you make. I know how you're progressing by the questions you ask and the statements you make, which is 100% true. And Richard, you're asking great questions, which tells me you are studying the right materials and in the right way. Otherwise, you would never, ever ask questions like you're asking. So congrats. You're on the road to becoming a very accomplished jazz pianist. Okay, so let's discover, learn, and play jazz piano. Let's discover, learn, and play a much needed recap of the past 3 weeks that officially launched our Learning of Jazz Tunes, a comprehensive approach. Over the past 3 weeks, I presented and reinforced my outline for studying and learning any tune. And again, the genre makes no difference, right? It makes no difference whether it's a jazz tune, a rock tune, pop tune, country tune, folk, R&B. This outline for studying and learning tunes is the same. Now, here's a quick refresher. Number one, I always listen. First step. And I always listen to various artists performing the tune. I usually start with vocalist, then instrumentalist, and of course, finally, pianist. Number two, I always determine form. When I'm listening to form first. Is it an AABA form, ABAB form, ABAC form? Every tune has a form, so I want to find its form. Number three, I turn my attention to harmony. So I learn chords, voicings. What are the common harmonic progressions that I'm hearing in this song? Like 2-5-1 or 1-4-5. Number four, after I have my chords in place, my voicings. Number four, I learn the melody. I learn the melody by ear. I learn the melody and apply treatments. So when I say learn melody, I'm listening for guide tones, phrases, target notes. I pay attention to my fingerings, right? Treatments, I'm referring to interpreting that tune several ways, as a ballad, bossa nova, swing. And then finally, number five, I explore improvisation approaches. I like to look at various zones within each of the sounds, my patterns within each of the zones, within each of the sounds. I like to develop motifs, study tension. So there's a lot going on within the improvisation approach, right? So listen, determine form, learn chords, voicings, learn melody, apply treatments, and explore improvisation approaches. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less, right? So over the past 3 weeks, we used that outline to focus on gaining a harmonic familiarity, a melodic interpretation, and improvisation approach for There Will Never Be Another You. Our goal has been, since 2019 when Jazz Piano Skills launched, to the current day and going into the future, our goal has always been to keep things conceptually simple, to keep things clean and tidy upstairs with our approach to studying music, whether it's a skill or whether it's a tune, right? Again, it makes no difference. Our conceptual understanding of all that we do musically must be structured and must be simple so that it can be replicated, right, repeatedly. Now, y'all can attest that I have said it many times over the past 4 years. If your conceptual understanding of music or any musical skill is not structured, not simple, then it must be the opposite. It's unorganized and confusing. And if it's unorganized and confusing conceptually upstairs, I got some bad news for you. You have no shot at executing it in your hands on the piano downstairs. No shot. Therefore, we will keep our tune study, right, conceptually simple, formulaically structured, and easily replicatable. That's the winning game plan, okay? So the educational agenda for today is as follows. Number one, we are going to rediscover, learn, and play our harmonic analysis approach. Form, changes, function, common progressions, voicings. Number two, we are going to rediscover, learn, and play our melodic analysis approach. Guide tones, phrases, target notes, fingerings, treatments. Number three, we are going to rediscover, learn, and play our improvisation development approach, right? The zones, patterns, motifs, tension. Wow, so there's a lot to sort out and get through. So let's get started. If you are a Jazz Piano Skills member, I want you to take a few minutes right now to download and print the podcast packets, right? Your membership grants you access to premium content for every weekly podcast episode, which of course includes all of the educational podcast packets. And as I mentioned it every week, you should use these podcast packets when listening to this episode to get the most out of it, and of course when practicing. Now, one little caveat regarding the podcast packets for today. Typically, episodes that are part of my lecture series, which today is, have no podcast packets, but there is an exception today. The illustrations, right, are available, and they visually outline my lecture today, right, that you will find to be very helpful every month as we begin to dissect a new jazz standard, a new jazz tune. I would definitely encourage you to have this in your hands as we go through this podcast and have this illustration sitting on your piano for quick reference when we are diving into harmonic analysis, melodic analysis, and improvisation study of the tunes that we will be studying every month. So, if you are listening to this podcast on any of the popular podcast directories, such as Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Pandora, so on, then go directly to jazzpianoskillspodcast.com, and you will find the active download links for each podcast packet in the show notes. Or you can log into your Jazz Piano Skills account and from your dashboard navigate to this episode where you will find one convenient link to download your podcast packets. Okay? All right. Now that you have your podcast packet, your illustrations in your hands, I want to begin with a quick overview of today's lecture outline before we break it down section by section in great detail. Okay, so on page 1, you'll see the harmonic analysis outline. And here we have letter A, structure and content, which is discover. Letter B, ear training and time, learn. And letter C, shapes and sounds, play. Okay, those are our headers. You'll also see within under each one a detailed outline. So under structure and content, you have listen, you have form, you have harmonic structures, which we'll go into detail here shortly. Under ear training and time, we have the practiced chord changes, standard harmonic movement. We'll go into that in detail as well. Shapes and sounds, letter C, deals with our voicings. Okay, these are the categories, the content for our harmonic analysis that we will follow for every jazz tune we learn, for every jazz standard that we look at. This will be the harmonic analysis outline that we use. Okay, so now let's look at page 2 of the illustrations. Page 2 is the melodic analysis. Letter A, melodic excavation of the melody with guides. Letter B, phrases and targets, which is learn. And letter C, treatments and tempos, play. Now, under letter A with the melodic excavation with guides, you'll see we have finding melody using guide notes and tones. We deal with fingerings. Letter B, phrases and targets, identifying and numbering unique phrases, and then practicing those phrases using target notes. And then letter C, our tempos and our treatments and tempos, which is this play, deals with our matching up our voicing and melody together, utilizing 3 different treatments. And again, I'll go into great detail with these here shortly. Now I want you to grab page 3 of your illustrations. Page 3, and you'll see that this is covering and outlining our improvisation development that we will use for every tune throughout the year. Okay, So we have A, B, and C again. Letter A, zones and patterns, discover. Letter B, motifs and tension, learn. And letter C, improvisation, exploration, which is play. Okay? Under our zones and patterns, we have our 4 zones that we are familiar with, and then our 2 patterns that we're going to be dealing with. The motifs and tension, oh my goodness, we have, looking at things from a harmonic-centric perspective with our motif development and isolating the sounds to do that. Okay, and then an intentional focus on motion. And we'll talk about that here in great detail here shortly as well. And letter C with improvisation, exploration, play, we're dealing with etudes here, right? We have our arpeggio and we have our scale etudes. And we'll walk through that section as well. Okay, now that's just a quick overview. I wanted to do that because that outline with the harmonic analysis, the melodic analysis, and improvisation development, this is our outline that we are going to use forever. Okay, for every tune, for every month, for every tune that we study, for every jazz tune we learn. Okay, so we're going to get really good. You're going to have this outline memorized because we're going to continue to go through it each and every month. All right. So this is the big picture. Now let's move from a macro perspective to a micro perspective. How exciting is this going to be? It's always fun. I think, at least, it's always fun to go through something with a fine-tooth comb. Okay, so let's go back to page 1 and our harmonic analysis. I always begin with my tune study. With a harmonic analysis. Thank you for listening to Jazz Piano Skills. The remaining premium content of this episode is available to Jazz Piano Skills members at jazzpianoskillspodcast.com. Visit jazzpianoskills.com to learn more about membership privileges and become a Jazz Piano Skills member. Thank you.